Ladies and gentlemen, if I kindly, we are about to start with our program, so I would like to request that you all kindly take your seats as we will be in the next 2 minutes. That you may want to take. Yes. We start with the program, and I'll be back. A very good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. My Iling SABC ato le tsamaisetsa mosebetsi wala ipotsa dipotso speaking to you aspect the broad has ha ke sa tswa tjho jwalo he sentse ke go lona, please take your we are about our session a very to come out of this place very much equipped. So yes, please brace yourself, and yeah, a very warm welcome to you. Please, as I welcome you this morning, for making it today on International Radio Day. Welcome. Without wasting any time, ladies and gentlemen, we are starting with our program. There's a bit of delays here and there, and of course, other. But because this for everybody to be here, we are starting our distinguished guests this morning. He is the Vice Dean, International Faculty of Humanitarians here at UJ. Let's kindly give him a round of applause as we welcome him.
Program Director. Distinguished guests, colleagues, students, and esteemed partners of the great University of Johannesburg, good morning to all of you. It is, as has been said, my name is Baso Nzenze. I'm Vice Dean in the Faculty of Humanities. We are also, of course, Humanities. And it's an honor to welcome the Executive Dean, Professor Kabila Naidu, and on my own behalf to this thought leadership session that is meant to commemorate the UNESCO World Radio Day. Today is Radio and Climate Change. So allow me to extend a special welcome to our partners from the SAPC, including Ms. Nada Wochela, who is the Group Executive of SAPC Radio, and Mr. Lungile Binza, who is the Acting COO of the SAPC. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we'd all agree that climate change is an urgent and pressing issue that humanity is confronted by, and it calls for concerted efforts to bring about solutions that will eliminate the threat of extinction that is confronting all of us. As we celebrate UNESCO World Radio Day, therefore, we look forward to the conversations about how this powerful medium, the radio, can contribute to be an instrument for change across various spheres of society. You know, last year, UJ marked 30 years of democracy and with a lot of events that marked this important milestone. And at each event, we uncovered just how important the radio was again and again in broadcasting the struggle against apartheid. And so it's a very powerful instrument that is near and dear to all of our hearts. Today's event resonates also with UJ's 2035 strategic plan, which centralizes the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, one of which, of course, is climate action. And as an institution, UJ is proud of the fact that we now use 15% of our energy comes from solar, and we want to double that figure by 2030. In fact, even the programs that you have in front of you, I believe, are made from 100% recycled paper. And so we look forward to the fruitful strategic partnership between UJ and the SABC, which, among others, will enable us to develop strong industry university collaboration that will benefit our graduates and, of course, the country at large, and bring about the change that we all so desperately need amid the rapid societal transformations brought about by technological developments. And so again, on behalf of the Faculty of Humanities, I welcome all of you, and I trust that you will enjoy the program that has been prepared for you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Baso Zenze. I could see with how you were smiling, you were actually like, okay, things are going down today. Thank you very much. And yes, thank you once again to the UJ for welcoming us today, ladies and gentlemen. So just a bit about myself. My name is Sibidi Molefe. I am a sport presenter on Lesedi FM, hosting one of the top 3 sport radio shows in the country. And yeah, recently, 2024, recently nominated yesterday as one of the best top 5 in the country amongst sport presenters, and being the only female for last year. So this is me trying to set up an appointment with you for tonight on my radio show, just in case. I have been on radio for the past, in August this year will be exactly 18 years. So I must say to a lot of you who are aspiring to be on radio, besides the top management, please brace yourself, because everything that you're going to hear today here will show you, help you along your journey in becoming that you perhaps desire to become as far as radio is concerned. I mean, you know, we used to read about it, used to hear some of our, you know, the legends on radio, and you would aspire to get to where they are. And I must say, it's been an absolute amazing journey, whereby today I stand here and I say, I happen to know very well the power of radio, because I am a living testimony of it in the 18 years that I've been on radio. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, let me right now call upon Professor Baso Nzenze. Thank you, as we've thanked you already. Let me move on to our host today here at the UJ, Dr. Sfiso Zondo. He is head School of Communications right here in UJ. May we please kindly give him a round of applause as we welcome him. For a second there, I thought you left, and I'm like, okay, what is going on? Welcome, sir.
No. Thank you so much. I'm not going anywhere. All right. Good morning to our distinguished guests, to our colleagues, to our students, and of course to the friends of the University of Johannesburg and of the school. It is a great honor to welcome you all to this thought leadership session where we celebrate the UNESCO World Radio Day under the theme Radio Meets Climate Change, hosted by the SABC in partnership with the UJ School of Communication, with the Department of Communication and Media. It's a great honor to welcome you all to this very special celebration of UNESCO World Radio Day, as we gather here to recognize and reflect on on the enduring power of radio as a medium of communication, education, and social transformation. Radio has played a pivotal role in shaping societies, bridging divides, and amplifying voices that might otherwise go unheard. It remains a cornerstone of media, offering accessibility and immediacy that few other platforms can match. The theme, of course, of this year's World Radio Day, as I've said earlier, it is Radio Meets Climate Change. This theme invites us to explore the evolving role of radio in today's rapidly changing media landscape. Despite the digital revolution and the rise of new media, radio continues to adapt, innovate, and remain relevant in the lives of millions around the world. From community radio stations in rural areas to global broadcasting networks, radio fosters inclusivity, diversity, and democracy. It informs, entertains, and educates, ensuring that knowledge and culture are shared widely and equitably. As a university that is dedicated to advancing knowledge and global engagements, we are particularly proud to support the discussions on the impact of radio in different contexts. Radio is more than just a medium. It is a tool for empowerment, a voice for the marginalized communities, and a driver of positive social change. In Africa and beyond, radio has played a significant role in educating, contributing to health communication and crisis response, and providing resilience, and it is indispensable. Today, we have the privilege of engaging with esteemed speakers, scholars, and practitioners who will share their insights on the power of radio. Now, I encourage you all to take this opportunity to reflect on how we can further harness the potential of radio to foster international collaboration, intercultural dialogues, and sustainable development. We are particularly proud as the University of Johannesburg School of Communication because as we are organizing this event today, it actually marks the first official event that we are doing in partnership with the SABC while we are working on a memorandum of agreement with the SABC that will enable us to expand our graduate employability program and to further develop programs that will benefit our students in a manner that they are relevant to the needs of the industry. So this is a very exciting day for the university, and we look forward to the engagements that we'll be having on this wonderful day as we commemorate the UNESCO World Radio Day under the theme, Radio Meets Climate Change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zondo. Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And we know that we are here because of the collaboration by the SABC and UJ. So right now, ladies and gentlemen, let me kindly call upon Mr. Lungile Binza. He is the acting COO at the SABC. A round of applause, please. Welcome, Ndati.
Thank you very much, Sibili Mulife. You are a testament onto how our true talent looks like at the SABC. Good morning to the Vice Dean for the Faculty of Humanities from the University of Johannesburg, Professor Baso Zenze, the Head of School of Communications from the University of Johannesburg, Dr. Sifiso Zondo, and then the Associate Professor for School of Communication within UJ, Professor Sarah Chiumbu. I know from the SABC that the Group Executive for Radio, Ms. Nata Wachela, is not here yet, but she is on her way well to join this session. But I've seen the senior management from the SABC Radio, FM, as well as our corporate affairs and communications team. Just want to welcome them here as well, but say good morning to everybody. It is a pleasure for me as well to welcome you guys to this thought leadership on World Radio Day celebrations here at the University of Johannesburg. We as the SABC are delighted that we have formed this perfect home, which is the University of Johannesburg. And they share the same goals as us from an SABC perspective, because we believe in the power of radio and the pivotal role that it plays within a society. The SABC hosts thought leadership every quarter, and it's very good for us to have fun in the form of the University of. And in those thought leadership sessions, we tend to invite everybody from the industry, from all the opinion makers, and we talk about what radio is all about. It is even more important for us and opportune that we are talking about radio and climate change. This theme to us allows us to an important topic that is not just only affecting South Africa, but it is also affecting the rest of the world. What is important about this is that it allows us to unpack this topic in a simplified manner that would also relate to everybody on the streets in their own languages and cultures, and they will understand it quite better. I am glad that we spent in this forum and share some of this insightful information with the industry thought leaders. As the SABC, we are honored to be tasked with the mandate of informing, educating, and entertaining the South African society. We've got over 19 radio stations in South African official language. And we've got the biggest radio station in Africa in the form of Ukhozi FM with over 7 million daily listeners. We've got the biggest commercial FM that has over 4.5 million listeners daily. To us, having the focus on is by far the biggest contribution we can make when it comes to taking the voices of the people to the world. As we always say, we are always everywhere for everyone, always. Without question, the future of radio is, and therefore we need to see how radio is also transitioning into that digital era. How do we evolve? How do we make radio continue to be in today's saying radio is dead, or they kept on saying radio is dying. I don't know if you guys remember the 80s song from the band called the Buggles, where they said video killed radio. That statement couldn't be more untrue. I couldn't disagree with that statement more. Because today, the SABC has over 20 million daily listeners on radio only. We haven't even started talking about the video platforms. It to us shows how powerful, how important, this platform is. So from us as the SABC, we really think the future is radio. Podcasting, broadcasting, the future is digital on podcasting, broadcasting, etc., which is taking, the radio stations or the radio medium to the next level. Today, we are going to listen to various speakers sharing their knowledge in the business of radio, and I'm confident that we'll come out of this room even more enlightened as we've entered it this morning. I encourage all of you to participate and make a very valuable contribution to the discussions of today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lungile Binza. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause. I'm glad you've already highlighted it, Tate Binza. Radio is not going anywhere, absolutely. That rau has already started. It has begun because of the podcasts. But guess what? Because we know how to acclimatize with the times, we are still above and going beyond over 120 years of going strong, and we are still right here with our very own radio. I mean, imagine if radio was to be, was to literally, I don't want to say go out of fashion, because fashion does go out, Imagine if radio was to be yesterday. What would happen to our communities? What would happen to South Africans, to global communities? Radio brings us together with our people. It has that intimacy that it brings, and only the medium of radio can only bring. And I take it as a gift, especially amongst our communities, because of the impact it has, the change it has, and. Ladies and gentlemen, right now, let's go to our next speaker. And this is where we are getting our keynote address. Our speaker is Professor Sarah Chiwumbu, right here from the UJ. Let's kindly welcome her and give her a round of applause.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I just want to take this moment to once again thank the SABC for partnering with us, the University of Johannesburg, to host this, thought leadership on radio and climate change. So my name is, as I was introduced, Professor Sarah Chiwumbu. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Communication and Media here in the School of Communication at UJ. Yeah. So my keynote address, I didn't want to sound fancy. The title is exactly the role of radio in climate change communication. I'm short. Yeah, so we welcome all our esteemed guests and colleagues, and all protocols observed. So this keynote is loosely based on an article that I wrote last year as an introduction to the Media Institute of Southern Africa State of the Media Report. And the title of that article was Importance of Journalism and Freedom of Expression in the Context of Current Global Environmental Crisis. And the article looked at the intersection of media, freedom of expression, and climate change. As we recall, 2024 UNESCO World Press Freedom Day theme was a press for the planet, journalism in the face of the environmental crisis. So in that particular article, which was celebrating World Press Freedom Day, I discussed the current state of climate change journalism in Southern Africa and stated that research shows that climate change coverage in Southern Africa is still limited, event-driven, and often reactive. Most climate stories focus on disasters, floods, cyclones, or droughts, rather than solutions, adaptation strategies, or community-led initiatives. So I also argue that climate change is often seen as an isolated environmental issue rather than an interconnected crisis affecting food security, health, and livelihoods. And additionally, I also stated in that article that journalists covering climate change face obviously severe constraints. Many newsrooms lack dedicated environmental or climate change journalists or reporters. Investigative journalism on environmental degradation is often stifled by corporate or political pressures, and also access to reliable climate data is another challenge, as only a few countries in the region have well-implemented access to information laws. So today, it is my honor to stand before you to discuss another critical issue at the intersection of media and climate change. This time, focusing on the role of radio in climate change communication. I think it was said earlier on by, I think everyone who stood here, that climate change is not a distant threat. It is our lived reality. Droughts, floods, and erratic weather patterns are disrupting lives, threatening food security, and exacerbating socioeconomic inequalities. Yet, despite its significance, climate change still remains underreported in most cases, sometimes misunderstood, and sometimes drowned out by political and economic headlines. The question we must ask ourselves is, how can we bridge the gap between scientific knowledge and public action? And obviously, the answer lies in journalism, media, and most importantly, radio. I think Mr. Lungile Binza put it very well when he gave us the statistics of listenership in South Africa when it comes to the SABC, 7 million who calls the FM, and 19 radio stations. And I think another power that these radio stations have is the issue of indigenous language. So I think what better platform to communicate climate change than radio? So radio definitely becomes the automatic platform, automatic choice to communicate this very important issue around climate change because of its geographical reach and also it's the issue that it cuts across language as well. So why radio matters in climate change communication? So I think in an era dominated by digital platforms, one might ask, why radio? The answer is simple. I've just said it. Radio cuts across linguistic, cultural, and geographic barriers. It remains the most accessible and influential medium in Africa, not just in South Africa, but in Africa. It is also affordable and serves, I think, in many cases as a trusted source of information, particularly in rural and other marginalized communities. Radio's power lies in its ability to translate complex climate science into everyday language. While scientific reports on global warming or climate change may be inaccessible to the average citizen, a well-structured radio program is able to break down climate change issues into tangible, relatable stories. So for example, a farmer in Zambia or Zimbabwe or Malawi may not be able to read a report from the IPCC or from the many platforms, global platforms that are discussing climate change. But that farmer will be able to listen to a local radio show on weather patterns and agricultural adaptation strategies. And that farmer might be able to understand the impact of climate change on the farming communities. So definitely radio is a very important tool for climate resilience. So I think I did mention earlier on the challenges that the media face in reporting climate change, issues around resources, skills, and sometimes lack of knowledge, and so on. But despite these challenges, I think radio is emerging as a key platform for climate resistance. And I think a lot of work is already beginning to happen in terms of radio and climate change. So for example, the first one that I would point out, the potential that is there for radio is localized storytelling. So radio allows for hyper-local journalism or reporting that resonates with communities. Farmers and local leaders can share their lived experience of climate change, making the issue more relatable and actionable. Number two, I think the two-way communication aspect, unlike print or television, radio, I think, fosters interactive engagement. Call-in shows, WhatsApp voice notes, and community debates, I think, allow citizens to voice their concerns, ask questions, and learn directly from experts. Number three, radio can also has got a potential to act as an early warning system. Radio plays a vital role, I think, in disaster preparedness. So timely weather alerts and climate advisories can help communities brace for floods, heat waves, or cyclones, saving lives and livelihoods. Then the last one, I think the potential that I put here is language and accessibility, which I talked about earlier. I think you agree that a lot of climate change information comes in the form of scientific reports or workshop reports or conference reports, and sometimes it can be very dense and difficult to understand, and most of it is published in English. So radio has got the ability to broadcast in indigenous languages, making climate change more inclusive. I think this is crucial also in regions where literacy levels vary or literacy levels are very, very low. So although I mentioned that there are challenges when it comes to reporting on climate change, I think we do have quite a number of examples that are already taking place, in terms of, radio driving climate action. So, for example, in South Africa, we do have using storytelling and investigative journalism to highlight climate injustice and corporate accountability. In Kenya and Uganda, there's quite a number of small-scale community, radio to discuss issues around climate, smart agriculture, and so on. In Mozambique, community radio partnered with meteorological agencies to provide real-time weather updates and preparedness coastal communities. I think most of you know that Mozambique has been facing a lot of floods and other disasters. In Malawi, the Association of Environmental Journalists has been training radio reporters to integrate climate change into everyday news coverage. In South Africa, I think it's also, apart from the SABC radio stations, South Africa is also a host to a number of community radio stations. I think it's got maybe the greatest number of community radio stations in Africa or in the region. And most of those community stations are beginning to tackle issues around climate change online on the radio itself, but also through community outreach programs. And this is very, very important. So these examples that I've discussed show that when used effectively, radio is not just a medium of information, but a catalyst for action. So I think there are many challenges and opportunities which that makes radio as potential to be something that I think we really need to focus on. But we cannot ignore the challenges that I spoke about earlier, and I think we need to come up with strategies on how to deal with this. I think issue of limited resources, obviously, especially when it comes to community radio stations, they do struggle with funding, equipment, and training. And I think support from governments and NGOs and even academic institutions like ourselves is very important. But there's also the issue of misinformation and climate denial. That's another challenge. In some cases, radio has been used to spread climate misinformation. So strengthening fact-checking and science communication in radio programming is very crucial. And I've noticed that a lot of science communication training that has taken place, it focuses mainly on print and television journalists, and radio journalists are normally marginalized. And there's also lack of specialized training. Journalists, I think, from radio need training on climate literacy, data journalism, and investigative techniques to report effectively on climate change. Because I think we all know that we are living in the digital age and the media is transforming rapidly. And one of the emerging forms of journalism is data journalism. So the ability to read volumes of data and use it to write accessible investigative stories. So where do we go from here? And I think there are many actions, definitely, that need to be prioritized. I think we need to invest in capacity building. We have to train journalists in climate literacy and solutions-oriented reporting. As departments of journalism and media, I think we must integrate climate journalism into our curricula. I know that my department, media, most of my colleagues are already doing this, integrating issues around climate And I think my colleague Antoinette there, Hoffman, she's our climate change champion in the department. So I think it's something that we need to do, but also I think we ourselves, the trainers, we also need training on understanding climate science. And I think we can partner. I'm glad that Crest is here, Professor there, is giving the scientific side of it. And I think partnering with departments like hers can help us or lecturers to actually understand the science so that we can integrate it in our teaching. I think we need to support community radio. I think we all know we're in the same room when we were celebrating World Radio Day, and it was focusing, also on community radio. And I think we discussed, there were people from the MDDA, Media Development Diversity Agency, who actually talked about, the declining support to community media and community radio. So I think community support to community radio should continue, and because they play a very important role in this discussion around climate change. I think we should also promote collaboration between journalists, scientists, policymakers, and civil society. And this thought leadership that we have here is part of that. It's part of that collaboration. But we also need to leverage digital technologies. While radio is powerful on its own, integrating digital tools like podcast media can enhance its reach and effectiveness. And I think my colleagues from the SABC have already pointed out that radio is not going to die. It's scaling up and it's adapting to digital technologies. And already SABC has been doing that. So I think it's a powerful thing that we shouldn't be scared that radio is going to die. Radio is not going to die, but we need to keep up with the digital technologies that we have. And I think radio, I think I also mentioned it, issues around freedom of expression, access to information, and media freedom cannot be separate from the discussion around change. So the last point here when it comes to action is we need to advocate for media freedom and access to information. Journalists must be protected from corporate and political pressures that hinder climate reporting, because I know that in some countries, journalists have faced persecution or harassment when they report on, for example, on climate change stories that touch on corporate interest. So definitely the issue of media freedom cannot be separated from climate change. There's also the issue of access to information. I think over the couple of years, a lot of African countries have adopted access to information laws, but there's still quite a number of countries that do not have access to information laws, and that can hinder getting data around climate reporting. So I think as I conclude this discussion, we need to think through what a climate conscious future would look like through radio. So I think radio, as I say, is not a distant threat. It is with us today. And it is many issues. It's not just an environmental issue. It is a human rights issue. It's a governance issue. It's a survival issue. So it affects every area of our existence. And that's why collaborations are very important. So environmental scientists cannot work on their own. Journalists cannot work on their own. Civic society or NGOs cannot work on their own. We need to come up with collaborations to tackle this issue. And if we are to build climate resilient communities, then radio must be at the heart of climate communication. It has the power to inform, empower, and mobilize action at the grassroots level. And as media professionals, but also policymakers and activists, we should not underestimate the power of the spoken word. So, and radio has always been associated with the power of the spoken word. So I think we need to harness the power of radio to drive climate action and amplify the voices of those most affected by the crisis. And I think we can ensure together that climate change is not just reported, but understood, addressed, and acted upon. And I think during that day, I would like to hear about, since we've got our SABC colleagues in this room, I really want to hear what challenges a public broadcaster such as SABC is facing in reporting issues around climate, because sometimes we might not understand some of the challenges. We can theorize as media academics, but we are not on the ground. So I think it would be very important to get insight into the role that SABC is playing in reporting climate change. So I just want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share these thoughts around radio in climate change, and I think we'll continue that discussion as the day goes on. Thank you so much.
May we kindly give a round of applause. Very insightful, Professor. Thank you so much. Indeed, radio is the cornerstone of life. When professors gather in one room with presenters, and they start speaking like this, indeed, you're giving us more hope. Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, right now, we are moving on to our first panel discussion, which will be led by a very gorgeous lady as well. And this first panel discussion will also afford you, ladies and gentlemen, an opportunity to take questions and, of course, receive answers right after the discussion is over and done with. So kindly take out your notebooks, your iPads, you name it, and just jot down some questions as far as the discussion continues, so that you may be able to afford it an opportunity later on to have your questions answered. And right now, ladies and gentlemen, for this panel, it is led by Professor Prinola Govinda, right here from the UJ. Let's please give a round of applause as she will be introducing the panel. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you so much. It's so kind. Good morning, everyone. Happy World Radio Day. Thank you, Sibili, for that very, very kind introduction. I must just say that I learned from the best. Prof. Chimbu here is actually my PhD supervisor, so she's groomed me. Okay, so I have the pleasure of chairing the first panel, which on the program is actually panel 2, and it's called Climate Change. What is happening and what can we do about it? Now, today's event, as you all know, it's a UNESCO observed event that started on the 13th of February, 2012, and this year's theme is radio and climate change. Our HOD here, Prophet Mayamari, actually conceptualized the event, and in this conceptualization, he says that radio and climate change highlights the critical role that radio plays in disseminating information, raising awareness, and mobilizing communities to take action against climate change. And Prof. Chimbu, I think her message was very clear, alluding to the power of radio, that we need collaborations and we can't do it alone. So our first panel, we have earmarked experts, which is very important. I know that we are the Department of Communication and Media and School of Communication, and we're focusing on radio. So despite of technology and TikTok and Twitter and most of our newspapers now in South Africa, you would have read a few weeks ago, it was the last copy of City Press, Daily Sun. A lot of things are going online, but as UNESCO has identified, that despite this technological innovation, radio remains important, and even more so for the African continent. Radio is still the most used platform on the African continent. So last year we celebrated 100 years of radio. So UNESCO has implored us to look at the role of radio in the next 100 years. And today, my two experts, let me just introduce them very quickly. I'm very excited. So we have firstly Sia Mayeza from Greenpeace. Do you want to come up, Sia? So everybody can see your face as I Let's give him a hand. So Sia Mayeza is the climate and energy campaign from Greenpeace Africa. I'm sure you'll agree that Greenpeace really needs no introduction. So Greenpeace, for those of you that don't know, actually began in 1971 by a small group of volunteers who organized a concert to raise funds to sail a boat from Vancouver to Amchica to protest against US militarism. And I think this whole US debate might be a bit triggering now, but anyway, that's how Greenpeace started. And the testing of nuclear weapons. Today, Greenpeace operates in over 55 countries, funded by donations from over 4 million individual supporters. Today, Greenpeace Africa is a growing movement of people acting in protection of the environment. Okay, welcome, Sia, to UJ. Can we give him a hand? Our next speaker needs no introduction to the University of Johannesburg. She is a part of the Orange Army. Professor Christy Langeman from the Department of Geography, Environmental Management and Energy Studies at the University of Johannesburg. So Dr. Langeman's area of expertise is the environmental aspects of energy. She actually conducted her PhD in atmospheric science through the climatology research group at the University of the Witwatersrand. She also conducted a postdoc at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado, and was also a visiting scientist at the Naval Research Laboratory in Monterey, California. Dr. Langeman also, I don't know if this is going to make you very popular, Dr. Langeman, but your work was very good here. She then worked at ESCOM for 12 years, first in the research department and then in the environmental management department, where she managed the Air Quality Center of Excellence. She spearheaded ESCOM's Quality Offsets Program, which aimed to improve air quality in low-income communities by moving households from coal to cleaner energy sources, and it was instrumental in drafting ESCOM's air quality strategy. All right, so let us begin with our expert panel. And I also just wanted to remind everybody, as I told, we actually started semester 1 here at UJ a few days ago on the 10th of February, and in my first honors class, which is a class about introducing our students to postgraduate research, we really have to tell them, why do you study the media? And there's so many reasons, but one of the reasons I told them is because the media is not a reflection of social reality. Often it's a sum total of power dynamics, of funding, of critical political economy, of politics, etc. And I think this panel is really going to take us quite close to what is the social reality of climate change, what are the issues. We really only know about climate change by what the media chooses to tell us and how to think about it. And then we need to marry, as Prof. Chimbo has said, we need collaborations and really then to just reflect on what is radio doing and what can it do better. All right, Sia, I think you can go first. Do you mind standing here? You have about 10, 15 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having us. I'm from Greenpeace, as Professor mentioned. My focus is on energy and climate, but Greenpeace, of course, focuses on a couple of other campaigns that are pushing, or at least highlighting, the threat of climate change in different areas, specifically in Africa. That's where our work is. But as Prof mentioned, that Greenpeace is an international organization. So, there we go. As Prof mentioned, we're an independent organization, of course, that is campaigning against a couple of things, but all of them are to expose injustices and really shine the light on the effect of climate change in people's lives. So our campaigns, this will be a very brief introduction of just who we are, the focuses, and then I'll jump straight to the topic of the day. So we're looking at energy and climate, looking at where energy comes from. Of course, we all know that fossil fuel is the major production of energy in Africa. They talked about nuclear, and then there are many other options that are available in the face of adaptation to climate change. Then there are oceans, where we know the economy of the oceans, but also there's a lot of spillages that a lot of activities that undermine the integrity of our oceans and marine life. So there's a lot of work that is happening there, and I will bring you close to why this is important for climate change and adaptation of communities. Then there's food. Food is quite a complex system, where it's produced, how it's produced, and how it gets to our tables. It's a whole story that contributes severely on climate change and exacerbates many other issues around climate change. Then we have, I'll start with plastic forest and then end with the volunteer program. Plastics. I don't know, many of us know that plastic, before it becomes plastic that we see on the table, it's mined. So there's mining that happens so that we can get plastic. So the production of plastic is a huge contributor to the climate crisis, and we need to do something about how we consume and how we use plastics. These are all part and parcel of our work at Greenpeace. Then forests. I know in South Africa we don't have big forests, but parts of Africa have quite significant forests, almost the same size as Amazon in the Congo Basin. So forests play a critical role in maintaining temperatures and driving weather patterns. But the conversation around, Professor mentioned corporates that overshadow some of these conversations. So the offsets where African government accept money from corporates to offset with our forests becomes a huge issue, because forests are home to indigenous people as sacred spaces for rituals and other important life threats in the country, but in the continent. But most importantly, we're looking at the drivers of weather patterns and their importance there. And then, of course, how people participate in Greenpeace. We have a volunteer and integrated youth and volunteer program where ordinary citizens can be part of effecting change and pushing for sustainable environment and sustainable plans. So, just bringing it home, why the agency in the climate change? I called it a climate crisis because that's where it is now. The temperatures, I love the argument that we always get where we say it's climate change a natural phenomenon or it's a human-induced phenomenon. Of course, the climate would change over time. We had ice age and then we moved to different ages until now where we have literally a boiling age. I don't know what to call it, but it's bad. The Paris Agreement highlights that we don't want to go over 1.5 degrees on average, but pockets of the world have already gone over that. How do we see that? There are many environmental, or at least we call them extreme weather events that raise an eyebrow if you pay attention to how these things used to happen. I mean, most of us won't look far back, but I think our parents can tell stories of the river used to go until here, but now it goes until there. The tornadoes, we never had tornadoes in South Africa, but we recently had one in Durban. The floods, flash floods that lead to landslides and everything. That's quite not familiar in South Africa, but we're experiencing it across Africa, as you see the photos. No, I didn't take it to the next slide. There we are. So this slide there, I don't know how to use this, so I'll just direct you. The houses that are broken, it's the remnants of what was left of Tomat after the tornado. And the bottom picture of the floods, it's a town in Nairobi, 60 kilometers west of Nairobi last year. And the other one is in Nigeria. This is just a few of many disasters that we've experienced in the last 2 years. the year just started. I'm sure we'll be reporting on more disasters. This is just to show how climate change is affecting lives. There are lives that get lost, but there are livelihoods that are also lost in the process, and picking up the pieces. It's quite a challenge, and not everyone is able to pick up the pieces at a rate. But I think the catch here is that most of the climate disasters fall in the global south, while the global south contribute very less in the emissions and exacerbating the climate crisis as we see it. So that's where the debate is and the conversation should be on how do we, as a global community, change the way we do life, but also make sure that the economies that are still growing and have livelihoods that are thriving and sustainable within this crisis that we all share. So, what are the solutions? What can we do? Of course, the conversations I always love about renewable energy is that it's unsustainable. It's all that. I think Professor will talk to that because she has been at ESCOM and then now elsewhere. So you'll probably get into that a bit more. But I think these solutions are practical. They are natural friendly if we invest. So here, I think the crack of the matter is how does the community, all of us in this room, never mind if you are a journalist or anything, but you see value in using or at least employing natural resources to power our lives. So how do we familiarize ourselves with renewable energy, solar, wind, and hydro energy? Solar is more on our fingertips. I mean, there are different scales in it. So most of my work really sits there on how do we make communities see that you can get a whole solar system that runs your whole house, including the aircon, but you can also, yes, you can, but you can also get very minimal one where you work the lights and charging systems in your house are solar. So we can contribute in small ways that will help eventually the universe. But okay, again, the propaganda by corporates and politics always take that away from us and make us think that solar is for the privileged or it's not a sustainable solution, etc. It may not be for everyone at the moment, but I think it's an idea that we need to entertain if we want our kids to have a life that we've enjoyed until now, because we can see that that is really shortening over time. Of course, push for industries. Trump just brought back the plastic straws, how sad. But we need, as society, we need to push back on such events where we want more sustainable ways of shopping, of living. If we get to the shop, everything is packed in plastic. Can't we all go and once we buy your groceries, your veggies, you rip off the plastic and you take your biodegradable bags or something. So it's small actions that go a long way and that will push industry into more sustainable solutions. There are many other actions individually and industrially. I was just touching a few so that I paint a picture of how we can participate in a more sustainable future. Now, radio. In my work, I use a lot as a campaigner. A campaigner is like, I don't know, it's someone who rallies people to see something that is either hidden or construed or something. So my work is really around talking about, but also doing a lot of other actionable things that will give examples on how we can live sustainably, or at least try to adapt as we try to figure it out. So what I enjoy about radio, at least what I've been learning over time, is that radio, specifically community radio, it's not only about dissemination of information, but it's also creating that identity where people can relate to a story. If I talk about climate change from SABC News, I can be perceived as privileged or educated, whatever. There's always the othering that may happen there. But if I talk to the listeners of Lingwala Gwala and I talk in the language, instantly there's connection and reverence to what we're saying and how we're saying it, and the stories will be very localized. That's the power of radio in uncomplicating the climate message. As Professor mentioned, it's very complex. It's usually high level. Normally, a lot of noise and, excuse my French, a bit of bullshit. But there is an art in unpacking it and really finding what matters to people in eThekwini, in Mpumalanga, etc. Because you put stories and people can talk to stories that they identify with. They trust each other, and then it allows you for diverse views to come online. And also, I think what also is important is how do we then create awareness as we communicate via radio and using languages that people understand? It's also how do we quantify the risks? You remember the recent snow that happens on the highway N3 towards KwaZulu-Natal. People were warned that there will be snow. We don't know snow in South Africa, which we thought it could be just a little thing that we can drive over. But had the radio people or had the information being quantified, the snow will be all the way to your knees, or the floods will be all the way to the windows of your house, then we all get a picture of, okay, I need to vacate. Because now if there was a warning system that says we're going to have floods in Joburg, we will all think about the small Anyana floods that we normally see, where we like, okay, I'll survive. But if it's real floods, where like probably a dam broke, we don't have that idea. While the global north has had many hurricanes and snows and everything, when something is mentioned, they get it. And I think that's the opportunity and the other space we need to venture to as we communicate climate messages in Africa and in communities. Quantify it so that people can get a picture of what we're talking about, but also conversations will help to make the message clearer. Thank you. And these are the sources where I got some of the information I'm sharing with you in campus, coupling with my experience in our work. So we have offices in these countries, and we definitely looking forward to collaborating with communities and also institutions to really unpack the climate message, but also find solutions specifically for young people to participate effectively in the economy that is threatened. Looking at how young people can be part of the green economy in the renewable energy space, but also many other social enterprises that can alleviate and shelter people from the devastating effects of climate change. Thank you.
Hello, let me adjust this. Right, thank you very much for the opportunity to join you all today. This room is full of communication experts, and scientists are notoriously bad communicators. So I must warn you, you are not getting the uncomplicated story now that Sia was calling for. But I trust that will be in your hands, and you'll be able to convey it further. Yep, graphs are coming. We can't do it without graphs. So I have been asked to talk about the scientific basis of climate change. So I have drawn heavily on the work of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is really a scientific committee drawn together from leading experts around the world. And in a certain sense, they do convey the scientific consensus on climate change. And I have focused on the impacts on Africa.
because I think that's of particular interest to us here today. So I'm just quickly going to look at what is climate change and the greenhouse effect. I think you all know that. I suspect we may have one or two skeptics hiding in the audience today. And then we'll look at why is climate changing, what are the impacts of the climate change, and Sia already touched on what can we do about it. So climate change is not new. Some of our longest records of past climates are from ice cores, and they span at least 500 to 800,000 years. So we're almost looking 1 million years back. And over that time, the climate has constantly fluctuated between interglacials and glacials. So this doesn't help if I point anyway. So this graph shows climate change of about 8 degrees difference between the ice ages, and our last ice age ended about 16,000 years ago, and then an interglacial, which is what we're in at the moment. And I think important for us to notice is that civilization, as we know it, living in cities, organized agriculture, writing, all of that has taken place within the last interglacial. Now, the other interesting thing that they found in these ice cores is that there was a really strong correlation. Now I'm not clicking. Between, I don't know if you can advance me at the back there, please. It's not, there we go. Okay, thanks. So there's a really strong correlation between global temperature and carbon dioxide concentrations. So stretching back more than 500,000 years, when the Earth has been cold, we've had low carbon dioxide concentrations. And when the Earth has been warm, we've had higher carbon dioxide concentrations. So you can see now, present times, interglacial, we started out 200 years ago in pre-industrial times, and CO2 concentrations were already high. So the reason we're so concerned about these CO2 concentrations is because carbon dioxide is one of the main gases we call a greenhouse gas. We all might think we sit nicely in the sun, feel the sun on our back, and that's how the Earth warms. But actually, the sun warms the Earth, and the Earth radiates what we call long-wave radiation, and that's what gets absorbed by the carbon dioxide, the methane, the nitrous oxide, and the water vapor in the atmosphere. And that's what warms up climate. So we've always had a greenhouse effect. Life as we know it would not be possible without the greenhouse effect. So average global temperature is about 15 degrees Celsius. Interesting, in Joburg, our average temperature is about 16. That's why I think it feels so comfortable. But we would have sub-zero temperatures across the whole Earth without the greenhouse effect. But the problem we're facing with today is that carbon dioxide levels have increased to unprecedented levels. So if you look back across the last hundreds of thousands of years, we haven't had carbon dioxide concentrations of more than 300 parts per million at a high point. And today we're sitting at 427 parts per million, and it's increasing every year. So we've increased CO2 concentrations way beyond the natural bounds. We expect that climate would respond. So what they do, climate scientists run very complex climate models. They've learned they can predict past climates with some certainty, but they can't predict today's climates if they don't take into account the increase in carbon dioxide concentrations. So temperatures are warmer today because we've increased greenhouse gas concentrations. So the IPCC makes a statement, recent changes in the climate are widespread, rapid, and intensifying, and unprecedented in thousands of years. So climate is changing more rapidly than ever before, and we're at unnatural levels. So have we actually observed these changes? The left-hand map there shows climate trends since just since 1980, and we're already seeing climate warming over most of Africa of about 1 degree Celsius. Precipitation, rainfall, is always much harder to predict. I mean, even today, we have 80% chance of rain. Is it going to rain? Who knows? So there's a very high level of uncertainty, and scientists are actually not saying anything for sure about how we're changing rainfall, how rainfall has changed so far, average rainfall, over most of South Africa. But what about what's happening in future? So Sia said the aim of the IPCC and global international protocols is to restrict climate warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Unless we radically change the way we live within the next few years, we're not going to limit it to 1.5. So we are looking at higher, at more climate change. So we're seeing warming across the African continent in the top series of graphs. If we look at the number of extreme events that Sia was looking at, so for example, the number of days where the maximum temperature goes above 35 degrees Celsius. In places like Namibia, we're going to get 60 more days a year under 3 degrees warming of temperatures exceeding 35 degrees Celsius. If we look at changes in rainfall, again, it's very hard to say. What scientists are saying quite confidently is drying over the western parts of the country. Cape Town, up the west coast, all the way into places like Namibia, which don't have much rain to start with. If we look at changes in heavy rainfall, again, in our part of the world, probably over the eastern parts of South Africa, we've already seen those floods in KwaZulu-Natal fairly recently. Those kinds of events are predicted to become more common in future. Drought in the western parts of the country is predicted to become more common. So all of this doesn't just stop with changes in weather. It has other impacts that Prof. Sarah was talking to us about. One of them is almost certainly a loss of biodiversity. In South Africa, we actually fare better than most of Africa when it comes to climate change impacts. And to a certain extent, we are better able to deal with climate change impacts. So I think the message here is that Africa needs a lot more support. But especially across northern parts of Southern Africa, huge loss of biodiversity is predicted. If we start looking at our food systems, the bottom right-hand graph there, wherever it's red or yellow, that shows areas where cattle are going to be subject to severe heat stress in future. So livelihoods, subsistence livelihoods, commercial farming in those areas is going to become very difficult in a warmer earth. Marine fisheries, a lot of people depend, especially in coastal countries, eat fish. And in the countries that are most dependent on eating fish, those are the fisheries that are hardest hit by climate change. Health risks, we're seeing an increase in tropical diseases like malaria, dengue, Zika fever. We're also seeing just heat stress is going to start resulting in people dying. So these graphs here show Lesotho, actually, they will be relieved of their cold. So high-lying areas are the only areas which will benefit from the warmer temperatures in terms of temperature-related mortality risk. But through almost the whole of the African continent, the rest of the African continent, we're going to see more people dying due to heat events. We're going to have damage to infrastructure. We already saw that in the KwaZulu-Natal floods last year. Well, not last year, previously. So the IPCC has said that to limit global warming, strong, rapid, and sustained reductions in CO2, methane, and other greenhouse gases are necessary. Sia started talking about what can we do. About 3/4 of greenhouse gases come from energy-related activities. Most of us took some form of transport to get here. we're going to go home tonight, we're going to open our fridges, turn on our stoves, switch on our geysers, and use electricity. Our electricity is some of the most carbon intensive in the world because we use coal-based electricity. So one of the things we're going to have to do to decarbonize is move to renewable sources of energy. We're going to have to electrify because electrification is the easiest way of making this happening. And things like hydrogen that we've been talking about, we may have to start using energy carriers like that in future. The other interesting ideas that are thrown around are in the space of climate engineering, some of which we do. So we have overseeded clouds a lot in places like Russia. And they have a sporting event. They've overseeded clouds to make sure they're not rained out. That's climate engineering. But now there's talk of doing it on a much wider scale. So pumping up fine particles into our upper atmosphere to reflect some of the solar radiation, capture CO2, pump it down into aquifers or into the bottom of the ocean so that it's not in our atmosphere anymore. These are things that we could look at, but they're untested and they could have huge other consequences that we haven't foreseen. So renewable energy, I think, should definitely be the thrust of our efforts. But that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sia, and thank you, Professor Christie. Didn't you all learn so much? Okay, so now's the time that it's an interactive session, but just to open up a few discussion points. Sia, thank you so much for highlighting that climate change is not just a pertinent issue, it's a crisis. And actually, Prophet Maya, in his concept note for the event, actually highlighted that policymakers actually call climate change a polycrisis. Also very interesting to hear about your youth volunteer program. I'm seeing a lot of our students, and I'm expecting them, and Antoinette is nodding because our panel 3 is actually most of her students. So I'm really looking forward to our students engaging you on that and how they can get involved. I think they have the energy, the Gen Z energy to do that. It also reminded me, I really enjoyed the part about actions and solutions, and actually that we need a paradigm shift in the global South and in Africa about how we think about energy. For me, I think sometimes often when I think about recycling and solar energy, I often actually think it's something they do in Europe and the West. So I think we need to have this conversation about how do we normalize that for Africa. Also, very interested to see how you're actually using community radio and how it's working for you, because there's so much being done about the rise of social media in activism, but you're actually using community radio. Professor Christie, you really are a true scientist. But with that said, very interesting presentation. Thank you for crunching the numbers. Professor Chum was like so many numbers. And thank you for making it such easy consumption to us non-scientists. Also, thank you for highlighting the science and the history behind climate change for us. And I think as media and communication scholars and students and practitioners, it's really highlighting the importance of science communication, which is actually a field and a type of journalism, and a specific niche that is required for climate change in journalism. And I'm very excited in the next panel, one of my master's graduates, Malaka Prince. I'm so proud of him. He's actually an award-winning science journalist, empowering him. I know he'll be delving, he's looking at me, but anyway, I'm so proud. So he'll be delving into that. I think it's really quite, in South Africa, science journalism and science communication is very new. I know we have Professor Mahita Akani, who has the Saatchi Chair in Science Communication at the University of Stellenbosch, but it's very new. It's a niche area, and a lot of our, as Professor Chumba alluded to. All right, so we have about 5 or 10 minutes for questions and answers. Juliet, I think you have the roving mic, so she's going to take that around. Please do engage our panel. We have about 5 or 10 minutes. Where is Julie? Juliet, yeah. You can just put up your hand. Yeah, this too. Thank you so much. And just introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for very interesting conversations. And our scientists actually did make it easy to follow. Even the graphs as well we could follow. But my question is to you actually. I think I get confused when I hear the term global warming. It is getting warmer, definitely without a doubt. But how do we explain the cold winters that are happening in places like Florida and Tennessee, places that normally don't even get winter, but they get like a lot of snow, and it's happening in other areas. Even us, I think the example we gave, I think that snow came in September. That's not that we all ignored and paid a big price, but I mean, we expect snow to come in September. It's spring. So I just want to understand that concept and how we can understand it. There's communication. There's communicators and people who teach, our students when we are trying to teach them around climate communication. Yeah.
I think we'll take a round of 3 questions. Is that okay?
Hi, my name is Mandy Storm. I'm the president of the South African Science Journalists Association. I just want to say that in a couple of days, the call for proposals for the very first World Federation of Science Journalists conference taking place in Victoria, 1 to 5 December this year, is about to open. So please look out for that. Anybody who wants to put forward a proposal. My question, though, is you talk about using radio for campaigning purposes. That's great. How well do you think radio themselves are doing on keeping climate change front and center in their reporting? Because I don't hear that all that often. I hear about snow. I hear about an extreme weather event. I hear about day zero, but I don't hear an awful lot of explanatory stuff that shows people this is part of a massive change that's happening, and we need to really treat that as a crisis. Thanks.
I just wanted to ask, South Africa is not landlocked, and I think we have more shores than other countries in Africa. Why can we not use hydropower? We have our mountainous regions, we have a lot of rivers, lots of streams, so why can't we use that? I get solar energy as a solution, as Mr. Mirza said. I agree. As well as the, what did you say, something about climate engineering. But I think hydropower could be a really good solution, so why can't we do that? And why haven't we done that on a larger scale?
Thank you. Please can you introduce yourself?
Oh,
I see a UJ.
Oh yes, it's also my UJTV news.
Thank you, UJTV. Okay. So I think we have a question for each of you, and then maybe you can respond to the third one. Do you want to go first?
Hi, so thanks to Prof. for the question about these cold events and particularly events with a lot of snow. So the weather has always been variable, and climate change is not going to take that away. I often think of a warmer world as a more energetic world, and I think that partly explains some of these events with intense snowfall. And if your oceans are a little bit warmer, that will also mean that there's more snow because you have a moister atmosphere. But having said that, I think these extreme events always log into our psyches, and one of the strongest global warming signatures that we are seeing in most parts of the world is warmer winters and warmer nights. So our cold extremes are actually getting less and less frequent, but we are still having these crazy events. Should I take the question on hydro as well?
Your attention, please. Please note that the bathroom are locked. There is no water in the library. I repeat, there is no water in the library. The bathroom are locked. Thank you.
Yeah. Climate change.
So, regarding the question about hydro, hydro is a very low carbon way of generating electricity. You need two things for hydro. You need a lot of water, and you need a gradient. You need it to flow from high to low. And South Africa is a water scarce country. So we do have some hydro stations, we also have pump storage, but where we have water, we often don't have mountains, and in large parts of the country we don't have water. So that's what's limiting hydro development.
Thank you for the question around the radio and keeping the conversation on climate change. I think you definitely hit the nail on the head. I think definitely in conversations that we get to do on radio, it's very reactive and event-driven, as Professor mentioned in her opening address. I think that's the shift we need to do as a country and also as a continent to have the conversation in continuous basis, but also take advantage of the nexus. When we run out of water, we want to talk about water. When we run out of electricity, we want to talk about electricity. When there's a food crisis, when there's drought, we talk about that. We fail to connect the conversation because that's how we're going to have a continuous conversation and really see climate change as a threat across all these crises that we will be talking about at that time. So I think the role of youth is very important here, the interconnectedness of the issues, but also being able to not always separate the water, like in Johannesburg we had a water issue. Let's not talk about that water is not on the tap, but why is it not there? And how often are we experiencing this? And who else in the country is experiencing that? And have that as conversations on radio continuously. I think that would really shift the paradigm of how we think and how we interact with life as we know it, but we also advance our understanding of climate change and its impact on our lives. Thank you.
MC, I'm sure we've run out of time. Thank you so much to my wonderful panel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for, yet another insightful session. Ladies and gentlemen, may we please kindly give them another round of applause and brace yourselves yet once again because we are going to continue with a second panelist. But for now, may we kindly just take a quick 15 minutes of comfort break. Thereafter, we will be ready to go. Thank you.
As we're about to continue with our session, may we kindly take our seats. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, we're moving on to our next panel of guests, and they are going to be welcomed. Of course, this session will be facilitated by Miss Antoinette Hoffman. She is a lecturer here at UJ for Communications and Media. May we kindly give a round of applause as she is going to welcome the panel of the panelists on this session. And yes, the topic here is journalists and students, the role of journalism and radio in facilitating climate change conversations. Let's give her yet another round of applause. Welcome, Antoinette Hoffman. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's nearly afternoon, and I'm very happy to see that I think almost everybody returned after the break. So we are doing something right. So Prof. Christie, Sia, thank you very much for your contributions earlier. I think we all feel a little bit more secure about our climate knowledge now and what we can do, which is the most important thing. And that brings me to the youth voices that we are introducing today, right? So as said, there's a youth program. They are the people that can make a difference, that can energize, that can inspire, that can galvanize communities to take action. So it gives me really great pleasure to welcome these youth voices today to talk to us. And we've got three speakers. The first one, and I'll start with the academic credentials, is Prince Malaka. Now, Prince was a student of Professor Govenden, and he completed his studies last year, his MA studies, and he focused on social media and issues surrounding that. But not only that, he's also an award-winning science journalist. So he really gets the science and how to translate the science of the climate crisis into something that is digestible for local communities and audiences that don't really know the science to the extent that, for example, Professor Langeman does. So I think that's an incredibly important role that you are playing, Prince. So thank you for that. And as I've said, he's won an award for that. He is a science journalist and desk editor at Power 98.7 FM, as well as at the National Research Foundation. So welcome, Prince. We look forward to what you have to tell us. Right, and he did ask, actually, he asked me to tell you that he did his undergraduate degree at the University of Limpopo. So welcome to Joburg. Okay, and then the second speaker for today is Kamfalihle Billy. She is one of our MA students, but she did her undergraduate studies at Fort Hare in social sciences in communication. And so she joined UJ as an honors student last year, and she happened to be in my class. So I was delighted to meet you, Kamfa, in class. And at the end of her honors year, she was awarded a Global Excellence and Stature Scholarship for her MA studies here at the University of Johannesburg. So well done, Kamfa. And at the moment, she is in the second year of her MA studies, and she is investigating the role that artificial intelligence can play in radio reporting about the climate crisis to rural communities in Southern Africa. So, Kamfa, we look forward to what you have to tell us. And last not but least, we have Fifi. She's over there. And she's going to join us soon. Okay, so Fifi is passionate about fashion, right? But that's not her only passion. She's also very passionate about climate change. And last year, she was the top student paper and presenter in the Contemporary Issues and Communication Studies course, and she worked on the impact of fast fashion on climate change. And Sia referenced that earlier. We have to change what we are doing, and we can take small steps. So if you are a lover of fast fashion and you are shopping, and I won't mention their names, but they do deliver large numbers of packages wrapped in plastic to your door. And if you are using them, I think Fifi will be telling you what is the price that the climate is paying for your shopping. So Fifi, please join us. And Fifi also reminded me that when I met her first in her honors year, the first thing she said to me was, "I am petrified of public speaking." And so this is testament to what UJ can do and what students can achieve. She's here today to represent her class as the top student and the top presenter. So Fifi, you go for it. We're looking forward to it. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to the speakers now. Prince, would you kick off the conversation for us? Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I must start by saying it is quite intimidating to present before you guys because I'm used to asking the what and the how questions to people, you know. So I barely occupy such platforms whereby I present or address. So once again, good day, ladies and gentlemen. As they have already said, I am Chabuke Prince Malaka, a science journalist and a news desk editor at Power FM. So I must start by saying this. I believe and hope that we are all here to spark conversations that will inspire action in diversifying our radio landscape. I've already seen this based on the presentation that was given by Prof. And because radio plays a significant role in bridging the gap between science and the public, I confidently say this because I've put it to the test and the results have been visible. I've drawn this from a number of science news articles that I've personally published. This includes a news article that was titled "Climate Change on Biodiversity," as well as South Africans bearing severe outcomes of climate change. So radio can, and it is still used to educate and inform the public by simplifying scientific jargons. Basically, we use radio to, as he has said, that in scientific world, they've got these bombastic words, and it is our responsibility as journalists to simplify them to the public. However, as we know that science can be a bit complex, well, it has always been, as he has also said, that they find it difficult as scientists to explain or to put it in simple context for the public. So radio can and is still used to educate and inform the public by simplifying scientific jargons. However, as we know that science can be a bit complex at times, we need to supplement news content with a bit of entertainment. This includes hosts of experts and leaders in science field. Through radio, I have had engagements with both the public and experts. This includes scientists, climatologists, as well as a variety of medical practitioners. So, however, ladies and gentlemen, for us to be able to sustain this mode of communication, we need to review and address possible threats. This is despite acknowledging the significant role that it plays. I mean, playing a significant role or crucial role does not guarantee a future. However, I acknowledge that, as he has said, that radio is not dying, you know. So I acknowledge that. Many entities have collapsed too, while playing crucial role in our daily lives. This includes our post office as well as the basic education system. You know, I mean, back in the day, we were given like free books, free everything at school, but nowadays, to show that these systems are collapsing and are falling while they are playing a significant roles. Now, learners and students are forced to buy typex. Now, learners and students are forced to
buy a textbook. You know, it's another point, or it's an indicator that certain systems that plays crucial roles are collapsing. So what is it that we need to do as media practitioners and academics to save or to sustain the radio? So the question that I would like to pose or discuss on is, how do we maintain and amplify science or climate change related conversations through radio? Also, how can radio keep up with the current trends? Here we also talk about the evolution of generations, meaning that you know, the manner in which the old generation, the manner in which it was hooked to radio, it is much different from our current generation. We are barely hooked onto radio. You know, the only time we are on radio is when we listen to music or talk about entertainment. You know, so this can practically be done by diversifying the content and team members on our radio stations. It should be a thing of the past to have celebrities hosting shows that have less to no knowledge of, meaning that we should do away with this thing of having to appoint presenters to host science-related shows just because they've got numbers or just because they've got a certain perception. You know, you just find that you have Prince because he's a well-known presenter, and then you want him to host a specific show that is scientifically related. So we should do away with that. Let's have people who have scientific knowledge to host specific shows on our radio stations. This, we can create something like a 30 seconds to a minute long science slot. They could also help in informing the public about climate change using digital platforms and social media to spark climate change related conversations on our radio stations. And I must say this, I have listened, well, I also did this today, though I won't mention the names. I mean, I have listened to several radio stations. This ranges from community, commercial, and public broadcasters. And you know what they do? This is what they normally do. And it links to what you have said earlier on today. So the only time they report on science or climate in particular is when there is an incident, you know, and still this will not only be anchored, but it will be in the headlines. That's the only time we hear about science. For a practical example, we had a tornado in the coastal sides of our country. We had scorching heat in the northern part of the country in Limpopo. The only time we heard about those, it's when there are fatalities, you know, and even though they will just say there are 10 people who died as a result of tornado that occurred in Tongam, in Eastern Cape of KZN, and it ends there. We don't go deeper into this. We don't focus into the causes of these natural disasters. This is due to climate change. But as radio practitioners and media houses, we barely touch base on that. So we only focus, I'm sorry to say this, but most of the time as journalists, we only focus on, should I say fatality? I don't know if I'm going to be on the safe side, you know. It is only when there are people who lost their lives, you know, due to these natural disasters rather. It's only when we report on this, you know. I mean, he spoke about the snow. I'd like to just to draw to that. That had we told the listeners and the public that this is the snow that we're going to have, and we quantify it, you know, the breadth, the length of the snow, as he said, that we could have just said it's going to be a heavy snow, so everyone must stay back at home. You know, we would have avoided the fatalities that we have recorded, you know. And it is also heartbreaking that, well, I've always used public transport, don't get me wrong, I also use public transport, taxi for that matter. Amongst the people who died due to snow that occurred in KZN and Eastern Cape, were people, I remember there were two women, old women and one in her mid-30s, who died in a taxi while the taxi was stuck on a highway. So you can imagine these people possibly died while listening to a radio, a very same radio that failed to inform them that this snow could be severe. You know, so that's one of the things that we as journalists we can critique and dive deeper into. So also now this poses a question: do we have to wait for severe heat waves, tornado, droughts, floods for us to talk about climate change on air? We don't have to wait until we record fatalities. I mean, as I've said, that the northern part of the country normally and recently experienced severe impact of climate changes, yet it is barely discussed on air. Same applies to the coastal areas of this country. I mean, now if we were to go to Limpopo or Durban and you ask those people about the implications or the impact of climate change, they can barely give you a solid answers because they are not well informed, though they've got radios in the regions and the province, but they are not well informed. And I must also say that my grandparents were hooked on the radio day in, day out. But what would make the current generation to be hooked on radio if we don't listen to radio now in our youth era? So we need to ensure that our news and content aligns with the current trends. This includes science beats. I mean, I work at Power FM, and don't get me wrong. Most of journalists there are political journalists. You know, they talk about politics, political landscape of our country and everything. So it also applies to our academics. Most of them focus on politics, how they shape the country, the government and stuff. But we barely explore these science, guys. I would urge a number of us to venture into science journalism as opposed to political. I feel like we are many in political beats when it comes to news. Also, considering the swift adoption to the fourth and fifth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence included, I believe that all these engagements that we are having here and the dialogue and the discussions are applicable, and they should not end on a theoretical stage. They should go beyond this where we apply them. I would also, before I conclude, I would also like to say, to give you this practical incident that I once had to show that as radio, I believe that we need to use current trends and social media platform. I mean, like now almost every radio has got digital sites where they publish. It could be on social media, it could be on YouTube, it could be on any social platform. So I've once published a story on climate change. It was focusing on the average of the number of people that we lose due to, or that we lost due to climate change in South Africa, particularly in Gauteng. And trust me, I had interviewed experts, scientists. One was from NRF and the other one was from University of Pretoria. The story was published, and then in that story, I got positive feedback well in the beginning. As time went on, I think after a day or two, there were a backlash, people saying, why are you saying this a significant number of people have died due to this? Has it proven, has it been proven, or you just trying to just mention the higher number for the readings? And I was like, I've interviewed experts and they confirmed that a very huge number of people we've lost in this country due to climate change. This includes the carbon dioxide that is caused by the mining industry in our province. So by saying this, I'm trying to show you that as radio stations, we need to use these social media platforms to engage, the public, to educate the public about science. So what I've learned from this, I was like, okay, this basically means that my stories that do reach the public does engage with my writings and my stories. So I would urge all radio stations and journalists to use this platform to reach out and to engage and address science-related issues. So with all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for the opportunity.
Good morning. Greetings to everyone. I am Gambile Billy, as introduced by Ms. Antoinette. I'm doing my Master's in Journalism here at the University of Johannesburg at the Department of Communication and Media. I am very pleased to be standing here today, speaking to the masses with my 2 cents of knowledge on commuter radio reporting on climate change. and we can get to it. So, for someone who's probably sitting there wondering, what is this community radio that we've been speaking about and talking about this morning and explaining how it works? The National Community Radio Forum in South Africa defines community radio as an independent, non-profit, community-based organization that are owned and run by local communities. Before we even get in depth of what community radios entail, this already gives us a glimpse and an idea of what we're actually looking at and dealing with. The reason that I specifically chose this definition is because of that. And it also relates to the same definition that UNESCO has, which defines radio community as a radio that is run by, for, and about community. So, Janata says that it is essential to perceive community radio as an institution that fosters community development communication. And it makes it easy for community radios to foster community development communication because they are based in the communities. They know what the community needs best and what kind of development that the community needs. And also it serves as a tool for knowledge sharing. This is actually an advantage to use community radio as a knowledge sharing tool because it accommodates everyone, including marginalized people who do not have access to all other sorts of media and internet connection to actually find out about climate change relation or any other kind of information that may be out there. It also serves people that are both literate and illiterate, which is very accommodative for everyone. So the operational structure of community radio is that these communities are managed, owned, and influenced by the communities that they serve. This I've already mentioned on the definition, that they serve communities based on the needs that they carry. So that if the people that are in the community can find themselves resonating with the content that is being reported to them. The programming often addresses key local issues pertaining to daily life, and these include climate change, education, agriculture, and community governance. So community radio offers means of empowering grassroots individuals by placing communication tools on their hands. Of course, if involved in the process of reporting, it's easier for them to adapt and mitigate and take action against climate change. So now, because I've mentioned that part of the issues and environmental issues that these locations are facing, it's climate change. Now we're going to look at the impact of climate change on these local communities. So climate change, we have heard it from Prof. Sarah on her presentation earlier. It is a global phenomenon. However, the impact in Africa is anticipated to be greater than in many parts of the world. So, climate change is defined as the alteration of weather patterns due to the release of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which come from both natural processes and human actions. This is also confirmed by the latest report of the IPCC that says that human activities are the main cause of climate change through greenhouse gases. So climate change is primarily felt at a local level, thus discussions and initiatives should be tailored to local contexts. This is what makes community radio important now because they're able to tailor all of this information based on the locations and locals that they are reporting to. So mitigating climate change requires swift action on all levels from individual communities and governments. So with action of climate change, it actually not only starts with the government, but in the communities as well. Community radio reporting on climate change. Now, how do these community radios report on climate change? They inform and engage the communities, informing them of upcoming events, what is currently happening in the community, the lived experience of the people that are facing climate change, and upcoming events. It also provides them timely information and updates for them to be able to prepare themselves if there's any kind of crisis happening or what they could expect in the community. So community radio amplifies the voices of local communities, sharing stories of individuals and groups affected by climate change. So normally some of the community radio stations would have like social media platforms or a WhatsApp where they would share the number of the stations and people would be sharing their stories to the community radios where they would be read by the presenters just to keep people updated on what is actually happening around the society. So the adaptation to climate change is initiated by access to information, underscoring the critical function of community radio stations. This is another point that makes it important to have community radio stations because there are people in the marginalized communities that probably do not have connection, internet, other media platforms to have access to. Therefore, they wouldn't be able to probably adapt or mitigate climate change without the basic information that they may need. Also, stations, they collaborate with scientists and policymakers to provide accurate and up-to-date information on climate change. I think the statement is quite self-explanatory, and community radio often includes educational segments on climate change, its causes and adaptation measures. I believe there's no one who would take action on something that they absolutely do not understand. Therefore, it is important that we provide all this education provided to these people so that they understand what they are dealing with. That will enable them to be able to take action on it. Oh, my apologies. I actually forgot I'm supposed to be changing that. So the challenges that are actually faced by community radio stations are limited resources and funding, technical and skill related challenges, navigating misinformation. And this is, I also read somewhere where they were saying that even in Malawi, it's hard for them to actually report on climate change because they are facing there's limited resources and skilled on journalists. So it becomes hard even for them to incorporate AI now in this new age to actually report on climate change, which can be very helpful in reporting ahead of time so that people can be able to prepare themselves ahead of time. So now, one of the things that can actually be helpful in reporting climate change ahead of time and allow people to prepare themselves is incorporating technology because we are in a fast-moving age where we cannot run away from technology, but we may have to quite adjust to it and find means of making it work for us. So journalists use satellites and drones to provide real-time data on environmental changes such as deforestation, ice melt, sea level rise, and sea level rise. So community radio stations use social media to share climate change stories, engage with listeners, and promote their programs. I've mentioned this on the slides before that they would use that to engage with people and to also get what their thoughts are on what is currently happening in the communities. So AI and data analysis tools help journalists uncover trends and patterns in climate data, making their reporting more accurate and insightful. So AI, this has quite been said a couple of times in these events about AI. So AI may not replace journalists, but journalists who do not use AI may be replaced by those who do. And I just mentioned that we may need to move with the times so that we remain at the top of the age. So, incorporating AI in climate change reporting, artificial intelligence is a tangible, real-world capability of non-human machines or artificial entities to perform, solve tasks, communicate, interact, act logically as it occurs with biological humans. So also the use of AI will ultimately enhance the quality of precision of media coverage in shaping public perceptions, policy decision, and action on climate change. So AI, you're probably asking how we're going to be using this AI. So AI can be used to predict future climate scenarios and their potential impacts on the local community. It can also assist in verifying the accuracy of climate-related information, reducing the spread of misinformation. AI algorithms can tailor content to the preference and interest of individual listeners, making the information more relevant and engaging more. So some of the apps that in Southern Africa specifically, we have access to report on AI. It's My AI Fact Checker, Agnes Climate Change AI, IBM, Watson, Google Earth Engine, Microsoft AI for Earth and Africa's weather. So now, one of the things that could be done by these radio stations to improve how they're doing things, it is to build partnership for greater impact. They could partner with local and international environmental organizations that have experts in this climate change. Remember, these journalists may have not done climate change or they may have not worked with AI before. So it is very crucial to ask for external help So collaboration with government bodies responsible for environmental protection and climate change policies. They could also work with universities and reach institutions that can provide scientific insights and data on climate change. They could also now involve local leaders who can help mobilize the community and ensure that the radio content is culturally relevant and impactful. Remember, these community people also want to feel involved in the community radio. So, in conclusion, climate change presents an urgent and multi-faced challenge that requires immediate action and collaborative effort on global scale, particularly in vulnerable regions such as Southern Africa. The integration of artificial intelligence into climate change reporting offers promising avenues to enhance the accessibility and accuracy of information, ensuring that marginalized populations are informed and engaged. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be standing in front of everyone, just to share a bit of knowledge that I've gathered in my year of study. And I just also like to thank Antoinette for this wonderful opportunity. I also just want to kind of give a background of how I got into the conversation of climate change. I remember my first assignment, I actually got a 0 out of 100.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was my first time ever getting a 0 for anything, for that matter. And it forced me to basically, pull up my socks, gain more interest and learn more about, the implications of climate change and how we are also contributing to that for, a better future. So yes, my name is Refilwe, better known as Fifi Mufokeng, and I'm going to be speaking about climate change and fast fashion. So I'm not a climate change scientist, but just want to give basically just a definition so we understand what it entails of. So climate change is, according to the IPCC, is a global concern with important challenges, including temperature fluctuations, acidifications of the oceans, and biodiversity changes. And I think it's quite visible in, the weather conditions that are happening and the polycrisis that's also taking place. So these implications, in as much as we probably feel like climate change is just climate change, they also have, these are implications on society. And these include health risks, reduction in natural resources, and hence there's water scarcity, which is a basic need. And it is quite evident, obviously, with the announcement that was given earlier about no water, which is frustrating. And resources such as land, plantation, and wildlife. So it's basically the gas emissions from overconsumption and production. So basically, it's everyone's fault, if I may put it like that. We contribute to global warming and climate change, and hence the conversation of fast fashion. So fashion is something that is ongoing, and I think it's a conversation that has been there, and it's always going to be there, of course. Fast fashion is the second biggest consumer of water, and it's responsible for about 10% of global carbon emissions. So according to Humanities research, fast fashion is defined as cheaply produced and priced garments that copy latest catwalk styles and get pumped quickly through stores to maximize the latest trends. So the term fast fashion was first used in the 1990s when Zara landed in New York to describe Zara's mission to allow garments to go from the design stage to being sold in the space of 15 days. So it's just overconsumption, production. And this is what it looks like, just like I've described. So it's basically rapid design, production, distribution, and the marketing of clothing. And we are aware that this is also contributing to capitalism, economic growth. So yeah, this is something to also make note of. And this all results in retailers pulling large quantities of product variety for consumers to get more fashion, trendy clothes at lower prices. So our biggest examples, naming and shaming. We have prominent stores that are responsible for how we look, how we present ourselves in the public, and these are stores that are basically preferred mostly by the youth, the drivers of fast fashion. So this is just to give context of yes, the brands that are contributing to this. The impacts of fast fashion in the environment. So basically, just to give a context, textile production is the second largest consumer of water globally, utilizing about 93 billion cubic meters annually. And basically, to produce one cotton shirt, it takes about 2,649 liters of water. As one pair of jeans costs or takes rather about 7,570 liters of water. And according to research, the textile dyeing industry is the world's second largest polluter of water. And this is evident because the water left over from dyeing processes is often dumped into ditches, streams, and rivers. And this is the water that runs in our taps. So, like I said in the beginning, we are drivers of climate change and the effects of climate change, and we're also consumers at the same time. So the social impact of fast fashion, as I've mentioned, overconsumption and throwaway of culture. So fast fashion basically creates a sense of urgency. What's trendy? I need to get the next best item that has been displayed. Have you seen what was on, what's the biggest Paris Fashion Week, for example. You get your influences from there, and all these brands try to imitate looks and push those for production, marketing, and just basically selling into, into the consumers. And we also have social media that is also pushing the narrative of the whole culture. I think it is also evident in what we see on TikTok, on Instagram, where we have influencers that push us to buy because of the sales and what's not. We also have, or rather we have to also consider the low wages and poor working conditions from the garment workers themselves, who basically work for longer hours for lower wages, 300 rands per week. And mind you, this is people who are trying to make it on the table. And we also have the government, or the rather, sorry, apparently I have like limited time. So we also, the impact of governance is laws that help fast fashion grow, big brands that influence governments, trade agreements that benefit fast fashion, just like I said, just keeping the economy growing. That is what is being pushed a lot, and false sustainability claims. And we've seen that with H&M a lot. So what are the solutions we are giving to this? More sustainable fabrics, wild silk, organic cotton, linen, hemp, to also support local. I know we usually say local brands are expensive, but we also have thrift markets that are also very sustainable. And this is also just a picture I took a while ago. We have thrifted a good quality shirt for 5 rand. So we're also saving a quick buck with that. This is also thrifted, by the way. I probably got it for like 20 bucks, and as you can see, it's probably from years ago. So sustainable fashion, recycling, reusing, that's the strategy. What do we do about that? Media outlets, let's educate more and more people and how we are contributing to this. Yes, we are seeing the effects and all of that. Rather, let's educate so that people are aware of how we are contributing to this. And that way we can find strategies that can help improve the climate itself. The government could also have stronger labor and environmental laws, enforcing fair wages, safe working conditions and pollutions, and as well as the public. It is also our responsibility to support quality, second-hand and sustainable brands, and to also mention that our education system to continue driving the conversations of climate change so that future generations are also aware of how important it is that we need to learn about sustainability and climate change. Thank you very much.
Right, okay, I think a big shout out to the youth. You're inspiring me. Okay, everyone, we have about 5 minutes for questions. So I think if we can get a question for each one of the panelists, I think they've done amazingly. I'm not going to wrap up because we have only 5 minutes. So where's Juliet, our roving mic? Can we have a question for Fifi first? Anybody a question for Fifi? You're still processing. Any questions for Kamfa? There is space for a question, so please feel free to ask. We don't want to stymie the conversation. And then Prince, anything for Prince that you'd like to ask over there? Juliet, there's a question from Prince. I think the kindred spirits have found each other. You're going to the conference, Prince?
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Prince, I just wanted to ask you, you talked about the journalists' awareness and the journalists need to do certain kinds of stories and focus in certain ways and contextualize stuff. And don't you think that we also need to do a bit of educating of editors and program managers and producers, because it's one thing for you as a journalist to have the focus, but it's another thing to get airtime and space, isn't it?
Sorry, it's attached.
I think that's very much true. I do agree with you. There is element of teaching and education that is needed to the likes of editors, senior editors, chief editor, as well as the producers. However, one of the reasons or one of the challenges that I normally or I've personally came across, because I've once proposed that to one station, not the current one. And the challenge is always funding, money to fund these courses whereby you train them and stuff. I remember recently I was having a chat with my editor about attending a certain because just because they're editors and stuff doesn't mean they know everything and stuff. There's always a room of learning and being educated. So the biggest challenge that I believe we always come across is financing this thing, having to find sponsorship, because most of the time you will be told that, oh, that's a great idea, but it's a bit costly, so we will see it at a later stage, and that later stage, and it remains a challenge, So yeah.
Oh, I think there's a further question from Prof. Christie. Yes, it's again for you, Prince.
Hi, Prince.
Hi.
So I don't think it's just journalists and everybody that needs to be trained in how to communicate science. I think scientists also do. So what tips would you have? Say you have a scientist on your show. What tips would you give scientists to communicate their science better?
Okay, thank you so much. So I like the fact that you acknowledge that it's not only the media practitioners that needs to be educated, even the scientists as well. So I think the best tips that I'd give would be engagements. Let's start with primarily like engagement. Engage through your studies, engage with the public as well. Don't just publish a scientific paper and then leave it there and then said I've published or I've worked on this project and then you leave it there. Reach out to journalists as well and then reach out to community members. Have these public engagements. For example, let's say you were working on a paper that has to do with cholera, just for argument's sake. You have to go to the people who are affected by this. You have to engage with them. It shouldn't be a case of, okay, I've conducted a study about cholera and then these are my findings and then I leave it there. I just publish and leave it on the internet. Let's try by all means to reach out to the people who are living with these things, people who are living in these conditions. So that's the best advice I think I can give, actually. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks to our panel. We really appreciate everything you've said. I think it was thought-provoking and I'm inspired. I don't know about the audience. And then I'm going to say goodbye and goodbye to our speakers. Thanks again for coming. And then we have our last very important speakers as well. So ladies and gentlemen, we are running a bit over time, so please bear with us and please stay. Thank you.
I think they deserve a better round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, our very own youth, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We are still continuing celebrating International Radio Day with the theme Radio and Climate Change. Everything is just aligning so beautifully so. And right now, without wasting any more time, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to just to our youth, just a quick one. With SABC, we're always acclimatizing with the times and. SABC Plus is a beautiful, awesome streaming service where you can get a whole lot more. You can even open up your channels, of creativity and. Just to mention a few things, because we do, go with the times. We do acclimatize with the times. There's no way you can speak evolution, technology, without us always being at the forefront, since we are the number one. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And right now, let me call our host, that Dr. Sifiso Zondo, he is head of, or rather, School of Communications head. Dr. Sifiso Zondo, we welcome you to welcome our next panelist. Welcome, sir. Let's please give him a round of applause.
All right. It is almost afternoon now, and we are still at it on the Radio Thought Leadership, the UNESCO World Radio Day edition, as we commemorate World Radio Day. And the theme for the year is Radio Meets Climate Change. I should tell you that when radio meets climate change, on the other side of that collision, you have got to expect to find Nada Ochela, who is the group executive for SABC Radio. Now, this is a position that she has held since November 2017. A portfolio of 19 radio stations ensures that the public broadcaster enjoys a 73% share of all radio listening in South Africa, with a total number of audiences sitting at 27 million listeners and advertising revenue exceeding 1.6 billion. Ms. Ochela is certainly among the most powerful women in South Africa. Would you not agree? Her illustrious career in broadcasting started at a community radio station in her hometown of Port Elizabeth, which is now known as Gqeberha, in 1996. She joined the South African Broadcasting Corporation in 1999 as a junior announcer at Umhlobo Wenene FM. And then in 2003, she became the program manager for the second biggest radio station in the country and went through intense on-the-job training in programming mechanics from ESP Media of Australia. In 2005, Ms. Ochela was appointed as the station manager of CKI-FM, formerly or Ciskei in Bishop, and was then given two unambiguous mandates to fully integrate the station into the SABC and to reposition and rebrand it into a youth radio station. Now, within 2 years, she delivered the present day True FM, complete with a prototype public broadcast service radio structure and youth programming. She moved back to Mhlobowenene FM in 2008 and became its first female and youngest station manager at the age of 34. Among her achievements at the oldest isiXhosa broadcaster is the current corporate identity and the station's first professionally commissioned on-air imaging, Molo Kaloku, by Slick Angel. She also launched what later became the biggest radio station in South Africa with 3 million listeners per week, the station's breakfast show, better known as BEE. Now, in November 2011, Ms. Ochera moved to Cape Town to become the provincial general manager for SABC in the Western Cape province. Under her current leadership, SABC Radio has managed to navigate uncharted waters such as the COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing digital explosion, and came out stronger. She is a proud graduate of the University of Fort Hare. She also completed an MAP at Wits Business School and various other broadcasting-related certificates. She was recently honored with the Transformational Leadership in Corporate South Africa Award by the South African Women's Conference Organization. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Ms. Nada Uchela. So this session is taking a slightly different approach. So instead of us having the panelists speaking, it's going to take more of a conversational approach. Right? So it's nice to have you here. So I'm acting as the host. So not so long ago, I was speaking to a friend. A friend says to me, they had a funeral. So at the funeral, so she tried to organize how to dispose of waste. So she brought a container to throw in fruits and vegetables, another container for glass, another container for plastic. Now, when she was busy doing that, people started criticizing her. What are you doing? Why are you bringing your wealthy tendencies into our space? Garbage is garbage, just throwing everything into one bin. Right? What is this? She said, no, this is normal. We need to be careful about how we dispose of waste. Now she was criticized. Now that said to me, it means there is a level of understanding when it comes to garbage disposal, and by extension to issues of climate change. I say you're bringing these rich people's tendencies into our space. That actually implies that there is an understanding and assumption that issues of climate change are always classed. These are things that wealthy people do. That means there needs to be some sort of social change that needs to take place. Right? Now, I want to engage Nada on this one. How do you think that radio can play a critical role in bringing about the desired social change, particularly when it comes to the issue of climate change? It's afternoon somewhere, so it's okay.
Yeah, afternoon, everyone. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be here once again, and I would like to thank you, Dr. Zondo, and the entire department of the School of Communications for partnering with the SABC again. Our partnership seems to be growing from strength to strength. I see more stations this year. Coming back to the subject matter, I was on Morning Live this morning, and a similar question was asked around the role of radio in climate change. I think if you want to rally communities behind a cause, anything that is a challenge, in society. Radio is your best partner, is a natural partner in driving important messages. And in the context of South Africa, the public broadcaster should be at the forefront of driving such conversations. And it is something that we are currently doing on all of our platforms. But yes, you are quite right. People still look at climate change and related topics as issues of rich people that they shouldn't be bothered with. But I think slowly we are making a difference. If you listen to our stations like Ukhozi FM and Umhlobo the vernacular radio stations, and here the people who are calling in from rural areas, people are very much aware that we don't have endless resources. They will talk about the problems of water and how people are wasting water and why it should not be that way. The challenges of overgrazing in rural areas, people now understand those challenges. You would hear them calling in and talking about rotating, or asking government to assist in terms of developing more areas so that they can take their livestock to different areas and not exhaust, the same areas. Issues of forestry, there is a little bit of understanding, and I think it is radio that has brought those kinds of topics to the people in rural areas, to the people who are not so literate, who would not have access, to experts like Fifi, who was speaking here. By the way, I was quite impressed with that presentation. So radio is a natural partner for government, for the advertisers, for example. While she was speaking here, I was thinking, do we ever go to the advertisers like your Zara's and your H&M's and talk climate change? Or we only talk advertising and then we contribute in growing this addiction to fast fashion by young people. But a lot of the clients that we work with as SABC, they do have those social responsibility projects that we would partner with them around, but I think there's still a lot more that we can do.
Thank you so much for that. I feel thirsty instead of drinking from a water bottle or drinking from a glass.
Yeah. Is that why we're drinking from a glass?
Though you're not drinking, you can contribute to social climate change in a positive way. So I think you've said something very, very interesting about how there seems to be a shift in areas that are not, parts of the country that are not in the urban areas. So in the rural areas, about how they, for example, speak about issues around overgrazing, which are related to the climate, of course. And I'm just wondering, because I remember some time ago when I was growing up, there used to be these stories on the radio. I wonder if we could start developing programs similar to them, which are focusing particularly on climate change to try and I suppose fulfill our education role as a public broadcaster.
When I was preparing to come here, I was also looking at the kinds of programming and formats, that we normally use to drive key messages. You're definitely right. Radio dramas, are a very effective and impactful way of driving key messages. You will remember, I think it was in the early 90s, but in the early days of HIV and AIDS education and awareness, there was an institution called Soul City that worked hand in hand with the SABC. The format that we used with Soul City was drama, whether it's a television drama or a radio drama. And that drama series was produced in all the official languages. And I think it made a huge impact in changing people's behavior around HIV and AIDS. So that's another example of the things that we do or the formats that we use to drive these key messages. But what we are seeing right now, I think the lady who was talking about community media mentioned it as well. The lack of funding for these important campaigns is what is a stumbling block to us doing more. And I'm sure that's how community media feels as well. The lack of funding for the public broadcaster. And people, whenever we say this, they think, you cry babies, you got a lot of money as the SABC, but the reality is 18 radio stations, 19 of Channel Africa, 5 television channels, the biggest newsroom in the country, and we are all dependent on commercial advertising. SABC is dependent on commercial advertising for about 85% of its budget. Now, what is going to take priority if you're on your own like that? So what we have found is that due to lack of funding, it becomes quite difficult to say, for example, train people. I think was Prince was talking about training the editors and so on. It's quite critical. You don't want to have people on air who are talking about things that they don't really have a command of. And then multiply it by 12. It has to be done in 12 languages. I mean, if the ZFM here, for example, wants to interview Fifi, she must first translate what she wants to say in the language that the listeners of the ZFM, are going to understand. And that goes for the presenter and the producer of that kind of content as well. At what stage do you train people, in understanding these issues? And then also, our languages, as the SABC, were the custodian, of culture in this country, and we were supposed to be contributing to the development of our languages. And so when you're talking climate change, whether you're talking developments in technology, there's new terminology that has to be developed as we move along. And that, requires money and partnerships, in the public and private sector for us to be able to deliver quality programming that speaks to the issues that are critical.
Thank you so much for that. As we're speaking about the India campaigns around HIV awareness, the one that came to my mind was those cartoons. They'll say, turn HIV into HIV victory. Yes. Those of the days, most of them would see all the initiatives. And I think for us, in fact, we have on this day when we are talking climate change in radios, we have stations such as the CDFM. It is quite telling of the initiatives that are being put forth by the SABC in order to speak to different sets of our population, not just focus messages around climate change, because the perception, of course, is that it is a middle class or upper class problem, so to speak. So that now we have bring organizations such as the CDFM, which serve different sets of our society, translating a more inclusive conversation. So I think that is something to really comment on. I don't know if maybe at the risk of hogging the mic, I want to open to our audiences to also engage with us on this subject. So if there are any questions, please feel free to take the opportunity now to ask Madam Chair. She's got the answers.
And while they're thinking about the questions, I just want to mention that the cartoons that you're talking about in the Soul City, they used to be funded by USAID. And I will say no more.
I will develop it. Right. Do we have any questions from the floor? All right, I think if we do not have any questions, I think, there is a hand.
Thank you so much, and greetings. Thank you for painting the picture of the role of radio and how each radio station in vernacular specifically really plays a role. I want to maybe, I don't know whether it's a question or a statement that we can together mount on. When you look at extreme weather events, particularly the tropical cyclones, etc., in Zulu, we always say, "Inyoka, ibiphuma ngapha, iya ngapha." And that's always an argument. There's nothing like an extreme weather events of climate change that's a snake. How do we unpack that and really change that perspective so that people can really sit with these events and go beyond just how we were taught to think and comprehend the extremism of these events? Thanks.
Thank you for that question. It's very true. I mean, even in the Eastern Cape, they will talk about ikanyamba, which is also another form of snake, you know. But like I said, it requires trained people, you know, to break these things down for our ordinary people, you know, to understand that these things are not things that you can go and order from somewhere and then it comes and destroys homes. It's because of our behavior and the way that we are interacting with our environment that leads to these extreme weather conditions. But I see a lot of young people, more and more, that are coming into our newsrooms who are trained in you know, in some of these areas. And I marvel when they present the, you know, the weather forecast, for example, or when they are called in by the stations to explain what is happening to the ordinary person. But my worry is still the language, that we are not finding the right words quick enough, you know, to explain these things. But we're seeing a lot of young people that are taking interest in these matters and that are coming through the ranks in our various radio stations and newsrooms.
Mine is more like a question and an input at the same time. You know, just like I have highlighted that most of the time when we hear about science, it's in the news headlines. You know, it's when there's a tragedy and stuff. So I wanna understand this from SABC perspective. You know, because we've had a scenario whereby the president was giving a State of National address. However, in his address, he barely touched on the affected areas, you know, the KZN areas, the people who were affected, the farmers who were affected by climate change recently in a month or two. He did not touch base on that. Additionally, the very same journalist who covers the stories, the journalist who interviews, you know, those who host interview posts on, none of them touched on this. They never asked presidents what are the governmental intervention in addressing such issues. Yes, we've spoken about 123, but you've never touched on this. He touched based on the 14 soldiers who passed on, the ones who were deployed in DRC, but he did not touch on what is the governmental intervention in addressing climate issues. And the same journalists did not ask such critical questions. You know, they never asked about that. So I just want to understand when it comes to journalists, SABC journalists, how do we work on having to integrate these questions? I think we shouldn't base our questions necessarily on what the president has said. You know, we have to focus on what is it that affects people currently. You know, because I mean, like we can get hit by another tornado at any time of the day now. So that will be the only time we address these issues, or that will be the only time us as journalists ask questions about these issues. Actually, I mean, have a look for practical example. The recent one in America, Those journalists were so critical that they even questioned Trump about the tragedy that occurred in Los Angeles, the fire that burned the entire city. So you can see how these journalists, or how the journalism landscape is so critical about everything. They don't wait for those who in power to say something or to address it first. So
thank you, Prince, for that question. You're quite right. But we live in a country of competing priorities. Like we were saying earlier, that somebody who doesn't have food now is not going to think about wasting water, because to them at that moment, water is a side issue. What they want right now is to eat, and it is not a good thing. I think we need to get to a level in our country where our priorities, are set straight. Actually, an economist said this on Metro FM the other day, that, he's looking forward to a day where in South Africa, we could pick one problem and say, we are going to rally all our resources and fight this problem. If it is crime, we want to make our country the safest country in the African continent. We take everything and we put it in that fight against crime. But the thing is, with this country with inequality, so we're on the, while we're dealing with problems, of food insecurity, and there's problems of climate change here, there's crime, there's education, there's health, and all of that. We need as a country to really decide what future we want to see for our country. And once we drive that, and make it a priority, I'm sure even the journalists, when they meet the president, that is something that will be foremost in their minds. Because right now, the president sets the agenda, so to speak, and whatever he has said, then they confine themselves to engaging him about that. But it also goes back to the areas of specialization. We seem to have a lot of our talent is more of generalists. We don't have the funds to train people, in specific areas. Yes, you will find one journalist, who's interested in law and, following that path, and find another that is interested in economics, following that path. But you never find people who are interested even in health. It's very rare that you find journalists in this country that are just, about health stories and writing about the condition of our health system. I think it's something that, in partnership with our stakeholders, like the universities, like government, it's something that we should drive really hard to have journalists that are trained, that are funded and supported, and trained and encouraged to specialize in specific areas, especially areas that we are struggling with as a country.
Good day, Ms. Uchedi. I'd like to ask a very small question. In celebration of Radio Day, what's something that you wish you saw more of in radio after 100 years?
My passion really is public broadcasting. Not because I've been at the SABC for the number of years that I have been, but because it is the area of media that I watch every day, and I marvel at the impact that we are making. I would love to see a lot of literature that is being written about that. We don't read about the heroes that have walked the corridors of our public radio stations, and the kind of work that they have done in the communities. We talk about it all the time. Especially when it's World Radio Day, they will invite, a legend who was a pioneer at Ukozi FM or at Disedi FM, and they will take people down memory lane in terms of what they used to do, the conditions they used to work under, and so on. But we don't read about it, meaning our history, is not being preserved. That's something I would like to see.
Yes, I think we will cap it here for this session. Thank you so much, Nada, for those insights. And we hope to, as you are speaking, I'm getting an idea for a Radio Day 2026, that perhaps we need to have a legend come and speak to us about radio. So that will happen next year. Right? So thank you so much. I will hand over back to our MC. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the invite once again.
Okay. Wow, wonderful stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, ka Sesotho ho thwe tsela e tsejwa ke motsamai wa yona. Le a se tseba Sesotho akere? You don't? You know that, right? Tsela e tsejwa ke motsamai wa yona. I'll try and translate, but it's going to be direct translation. You'll just, in short, it means that the journey is known best by those who've walked it. So, ladies and gentlemen, please let's give Nada Wachela a round of applause, the head of the radio SABC, and of course, Dr. Siso Zondo. We thank you very much, sir. And that's how we come to the end of our program, our session for the day. Ladies and gentlemen, a happy International Radio Day to all of you. Thank you very much to all the speakers. Just so, please kindly check under your chairs. There are some goodie bags there. Yes, I'm sure you'll enjoy them. No, it's not food, but hopefully you will like them. Courtesy of the SABC. Enjoy them, ladies and gentlemen. And right now, just a quick one to all our speakers. May you kindly just go for lunch, and to all the students, the request is that you remain seated until all the speakers have dished, and then you can all go and dish for yourselves. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please tune in to Lissity FM this evening, 7 to 8, Mondays to Fridays. Thank you very much. God bless.